Today, we're going to be talking about the most interesting military spacecraft concepts. I won't bore you with reconnaissance satellites, and we'll focus more on the ones that involve blowing stuff up. As with many things, this all starts with the Germans. In World War II, the Germans pioneered liquid-fueled rockets in an attempt to make a Wunderwaffe, or a wonder weapon that would change the tide of the war. One of these was called the Silbervogel, or America Bomber. The development of this rocket was led by Eugene Sanger and his assistant Irene Brett. They envisioned a large rocket-powered bomber that would be launched on a rocket sled that would accelerate the bomber past the speed of sound before it taking off under its own power. The Silbervogel would then continue to ascend up to 145 kilometers, going a speed of 21,000 kilometers an hour, only 7,000 short of proper orbital velocity. Since it wasn't going fast enough to stay in orbit, it would gradually descend back into the atmosphere, and it would use air resistance to bounce back into space. Then it would complete a series of bounces all the way across the Atlantic and drop a 4,000 kilogram bomb on the United States. Mind you, this wouldn't be a nuclear bomb, just a regular bomb with conventional explosives. Once the bomb was dropped, the Silbervogel would then continue bouncing off the atmosphere and land somewhere in the Japanese-occupied Pacific. One major flaw in this design was that they seriously underestimated the amount of atmospheric re-entry heating that this bomber would experience. Because of this, they didn't really incorporate much heat shielding in the design, and it most likely would have burned up upon re-entry. After the war, Sanger and Brent moved to France to help with their space program. While they were there, Stalin took an interest in their Silbervogel design. So he sent some people to try to recruit Sanger and Brent, but they declined. So he sent the secret police to try to kidnap Sanger and Brent, but that plan also failed. Frustrated, Stalin got Mstislav Keldysh to research the German Silbervogel. This is stupid. Much better. The Keldysh bomber was essentially just a carbon copy of the Silbervogel, but with ramjets. Now let's take a look at the Americans. After the war, they took up the pastime of recruiting German scientists, notably Walter Dornberger and Kraft Ericke. They were quite fond of Eugene Sanger's Silbervogel design, and they even attempted to recruit him at one point, but he declined. In 1952, they proposed the bomber missile, or BOMMI. It had two stages. The first would accelerate for 2 minutes before the second stage separated and climb to a lackluster 30 kilometers at a speed of only Mach 4. It would then proceed to glide another 6,000 kilometers before dropping a nuclear bomb. The Air Force was unimpressed by these lame numbers, so they went back to the drawing board to improve this design. And improve they did, with the new BOMMI MX-2276 being capable of reaching Mach 20 at an altitude of 80 kilometers. This new design improved many things, notably it added an expendable second stage to help it get up to that speed. This mission profile would be similar, with the first stage taking off on a runway, then the third stage riding on the second stage before detaching and activating its own engines, and then dropping a nuclear bomb on the other side of the planet. Later, the Air Force wanted to expand on this manned hypersonic weapons program beyond the BOMMI, so they reached out to 6 companies, Boeing, Convair, Douglas, McDonnell, North American, and Republic, to help them develop this new rocket bomber. And that's what they called it, Robo, or Rocket Bomber. This bomber would be launched vertically on a traditional multi-stage rocket. What rocket, you may be asking? I don't know, and neither did they. It was kind of just a placeholder rocket that was never really developed. We do know that this rocket would be fueled by ammonia and fluorine. These two react to form very nasty tetrafluorohydrazine and hydrogen fluoride, both very nasty chemicals. The Robo itself had delta wings with vertical stabilizers, which were later swapped out for vertical wing tips. The leading edges of these wings would be actively cooled by liquid sodium, so the entire thing wouldn't evaporate while going orbital velocity within the atmosphere. Its payload would be a 1,300 kilogram nuclear bomb, which would eject out the back before gliding over to friendly territory. Development of this project was going well until... Dude, will this thing actually work? I'm gonna be real. Maybe. The launch of Sputnik made the US government accelerate their crewed space program, and they wanted to weed out anything that wasn't viable. So the Air Force merged these programs into 3 smaller programs contained into one larger program. Behold, the X-20 Dinosaur, or Dynamic Soarer. There were 3 versions of the spacecraft. Dinosaur 1 for boring reconnaissance stuff, Dinosaur 2, which would have incorporated a lot of technology from bombing, and Dinosaur 3, which would have strategic bombing capability as well as other weapon systems. But how would it get into orbit in the first place? Well, the original proposal suggested using the god-awful ammonia fluorine engines, but the Air Force opted to use one of the pre-existing Titan missiles, though that didn't last long since this program was cancelled in favor of expanding the Gemini program as well as the Manned Orbital Laboratory, which was also cancelled later.
Oh my god. The Americans have a space bomber. The Americans have a space bomber. The Americans have a space bomber. So, we need a space fighter.
Inspired by the threat of the Americans, Defense Ministry Marshal Rodiono Malinowski made a 5-year plan called On Military Space Programs for 1964 through 69. This plan basically said, make better Vostok spy satellites, make an interceptor bomber spaceplane, and make a military interceptor combat Soyuz. Let's talk about the combat Soyuz first. Designated the title Soyuz 7K PPK, it was the cooler brother of the lame Soyuz P reconnaissance craft. It would rendezvous with an enemy satellite and inspect it. If it was deemed a threat, the Soyuz would back up to a kilometer away before firing its rockets and destroying the craft. This concept never really got that far into development since it's kind of a stupid idea, though it was seriously considered for a hot minute. Now let's talk about the spaceplane bomber. It was called the MiG-105 Spiral. Yes, that MiG. There would be 3 versions of the spacecraft, one for reconnaissance, one for destroying space targets, and one to attack ground targets from space. The spacecraft itself would be very short and stubby, the engineers giving it the nickname Lapat, which meant wooden shoe in Russian. This spaceplane would also have folding wings, which would be in the upward position during launch and re-entry, but would then fold down for gliding in the atmosphere, along with a small jet engine to make it fly a little bit easier. Well, how would this spaceplane get into orbit in the first place? Well, it would have a rocket stage on the back of it. Oh yeah, and the whole thing would be mounted on a hypersonic jet, which would accelerate to Mach 6 before the rocket separated into space. Wait, why didn't you animate that part? Oh, I did. Roll the clip. That was pretty cool, huh? Well, now that we're on the topic of Soviet space weapons, I feel obliged to mention the Salyut 3 gun, since it's the only one of these that actually flew, and it's by far one of the most popular known military spacecraft. And a lot of people don't really know how much this gun sucked. It was a 23mm autocannon with some serious firepower, though it wasn't on a swivel. Instead, it was mounted in place, so to aim the gun, you would have to aim the entire station. And now for the little segment I'd like to call, Why Bullets Suck in Space. Let's say there's a hostile spacecraft right in front of you. You aim your gun perfectly and fire. But uh-oh, that's not how orbital mechanics works. If they're behind you, the opposite problem. If they're in a higher orbit, you would still need to take account for orbital mechanics or else you would miss. And these are ideal scenarios. They probably wouldn't just sit there and wait for the bullets to hit them. Dude, what if Russia wants to nuke us? What can we do? We could nuke the nukes. That's stupid, it wouldn't even work. What if we put lasers on the nukes? We are so smart. Project Excalibur was essentially just space-based, nuclear-powered lasers for blowing up Russian nukes. And when I say nuclear-powered, I don't mean my reactors, I mean by nuclear bombs. Let me explain. Inside of a laser, there's a lasing rod with atoms in it. When energy is put into these atoms, some of the excited electrons will drop down to a lower orbital and release a photon. And the real limiting factor for the strength of a laser is the strength of the power source. And what has more power than a nuclear bomb? The main idea was to surround a nuclear bomb with dozens of lasing rods, each able to move around and aim at Russian warheads. When the nuclear bomb went off, extreme amounts of energy would be dumped into the lasing rods, creating high-energy laser beams capable of destroying any missiles. There's just one small problem: the atmosphere. If they had to shoot through any of the atmosphere, the narrow beams would scatter, making them harmless. So Wood and Teller put their heads together and came up with Excalibur Plus. It was to be 1,000 times more powerful than Excalibur. Actually, scratch that. Super Excalibur. It would be 1,000 times more powerful than Excalibur Plus. It would sit in geostationary orbit and have hundreds of thousands of lasing rods. There was much criticism to this program, as you'd probably guess. This, along with the many failed tests, led Congress to strip them of their funding. With Excalibur dead, Teller and Wood pitched a new program called Brilliant Pebbles, a plan that included hundreds of anti-missile missiles stationed in low Earth orbit. But that's a topic for another video. Who knows, I might make a part 2 one day. I'm gonna leave it off right here. If you like this video, please make sure to subscribe. These videos take forever to research and animate. And if you have any ideas for the next video, be sure to leave them in the comments below. And thanks for watching.